Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jorge Heine. I teach at the Paris School, and I much appreciate the invitation to participate in this research on tap. First time I do this, we'll see whether I manage to say what I want to say in 4 minutes. So what is the question that I ask? The question that I ask myself is, what brings Latin America and China together? These are two very distant regions. There is no region that is farther away from China than Latin America. Chinese children are taught in school that if they dig a hole and dig all the way through, they will come out to the other side of the earth, and that would be in Chile. So the question then becomes, how come today for South America, China is the #1 trading partner, more than the United States, more than Europe? And total trade between China and Latin America in 2021 was $451 billion, which is 45 times more than it was in 2000. So what brings China and Latin America together? And this is not an innocent question. The past president of the Inter-American Development Bank said that this was an unnatural relationship. There was something wrong with it. That Latin America, the implication was, should go back to the traditional partners that had been around for 200 years, the United States and Europe, and that somehow China's emergence as such a key trading partner in the new century was again something unnatural. Now, not so fast. If we go back, well, a few centuries, we will realize, and some people have argued, that globalization actually started in the relationship between Asia and China and Latin America as far back as 1565 with the Manila Galleon that traversed the Pacific Ocean on a regular yearly cruise. I mean, let's think about it. 250 years, a regular yearly cruise with these huge galleons, 2,000 tons, bringing China, porcelain, silk from China all the way to the Americas. From the Americas, this was Manila, Acapulco, and then all the way down to Veracruz and across to Spain, bringing together China and Latin America way back. So some would say that, in fact, the complementary nature of the economies of Latin America and China go way back. The pattern, interestingly, is similar in the sense that it was silver that was sent back to China, commodities, and natural resource, and manufactured products that were brought back. Now, these graphs will tell you how trade, that has been the main driver of the relationship between China and Latin America in the current century, has increased exponentially. We've also seen an increase in investment, quite significant. And here it's important to put things in perspective. Total trade between China and the United States in 2022 was $690 billion. If you compare that with trade between Latin America, which is a much smaller economy than the United States, at $450 billion, you will realize how significant that trade is for the region. The other thing in terms of investment, which is interesting to note, is that in the past few years, China is investing more in Latin America than it is investing in the United States because of all the restrictions that have been imposed on Chinese investment in the United States. That is what is happening now. On the question of distance, again, one might think because distance is so significant, there would be few state and official visits from China to Latin America. In fact, the opposite is true. President Xi in 6 years made 5 visits to 13 countries in Latin America, which is more than President Obama and President Trump did together in 12 years. And this graph that you can see there, the case of Brazil, is obvious why there should be so many visits. What is less obvious is that the second country with the highest number of high-level visits in Latin America is Chile, which for some would be intuitive. The point I'm trying to make is that for all intents and purposes, for high-level policymakers and government leaders in Latin America, many of them will have a higher chance of interacting with their Chinese counterparts than they will have with their US counterparts. So distance is in the eye of the beholder. And let me finish with the Belt and Road Initiative, which is, much maligned in certain circles and described as an instrument of debt, so-called debt diplomacy. And here it is interesting to note the following. I arrived in Beijing in mid of 2014, shortly after the Belt and Road Initiative had been announced in late 2013. And as you may recall, Belt and Road was originally basically aimed at recreating the Silk Road, recreating Eurasia. The Americas did not appear in the initial design, but a couple of years later, we have the Americas in it. Two Latin American presidents, Michelle Bachelet and Mauricio Macri of Argentina, Michelle Bachelet of Chile, participated in the first Belt and Road Cooperation Forum in Beijing in May of 2017. And again, the Chilean president was the only Latin American leader in the second BRI Cooperation Forum in April of 2019. And here, what is interesting to note is that often people who analyze the interaction between China and Latin America attribute all the initiative and all sorts of designs to Beijing. Belt and Road is a case which shows what we must look at the interaction. The reason Latin America ended up being part of Belt and Road is because Latin American countries wanted this to be so and made it happen. So it seems to me there's a lesson there for all those who want to look at the interaction between China and the rest of the world. Thank you.